Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this third Women's Climate Congress conversation. I'm Lynn Stevens, a member of the WCC, and I'm your moderator for this evening. The music you just heard was from a chorus of women, and we'll hear a little bit more about that shortly. This evening we have a group of people from around Australia and possibly even a couple from overseas. So welcome everyone. We're really delighted that you could join us this evening. I'm not sure if we've got Karen here yet, but I will mention that we're expecting Karen Porter, who's a candidate for the Eden Monaro by-election. She is an independent and she'll be joining us if she's able to manage it this evening as a citizen, not as a candidate, but just so you're aware of that. And before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that we're coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands, and we'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to thank them for their ongoing stewardship of the land over many thousands of years. And I'd like to acknowledge in a similar way the elders in each country where those of you who have joined us this evening are located. The purpose of this evening is to explore with you how women can build the political will to promote climate balance post-COVID-19. This is a working meeting, so we do want to hear from you. And the WCC will use what comes out of this conversation to develop our planning and to help us prepare for our meeting with the National COVID-19 Coordination Commission, and which is happening on Thursday this week. So it's really important that we hear what you have to say, because we want to include that in our meeting with the Commission. But before we get started, a little bit more housekeeping. Sarah Stitt, with the beautiful orange background, is our technical monitor for this evening, and Jenny Robertson is doing the music for us. So thank you both for your help. If you're having any trouble, any technical difficulties, please use the chat at the bottom of your screen. Just type in and Sarah will assist you. If you look at the right-hand corner of your screen, you can choose speaker view, which will focus on whoever is speaking, or gallery view. It's up to you, but for tonight, it might be nice to keep to gallery view because we are meeting as a group. When we get time for the open conversation, we'll ask you to raise your hand and unmute yourself when I say your name. And if somehow we're not able to, you don't attract my attention, please type into the chat and we'll pick you up that way. We will be recording the session because we want to put it on our website and our Facebook page. And as I said, we'll be taking your ideas into our work. And if this would cause you any problems, again, please let Sarah know. And as well, finally, if you prefer not to be seen, you can switch your video off just by clicking on the video screen on the bottom. So that's the end of housekeeping. Now just explain how the evening will progress. As usual, we'll start with a song, and we'll have a brief check-in to enable you to introduce yourself to the others here. Then Janet will talk a little bit to set the scene for our conversation about the 3 questions which we sent out to you. Now don't worry if you haven't got the questions in front of you, I will repeat them, but we're going to sort of spend about 10 minutes on each of those questions before we bring the themes together and close off at 8 o'clock tonight. So I now ask Janet if she would introduce our song for this evening. We know that many of you have been working all day, so we'd like to offer you just a brief respite. Sit back, enjoy, take a breath, and listen to Ubuntu.
But actually, you're going to listen to me giving you a little
okay.
information about it first, because this is just one of those songs that you can't just sing. This song, which you already actually heard a little bit of in the background, some of you at least, maybe not all of you, as you came on, we were playing in the background a song which is called Ubuntu. And this song was written many years ago now by the musical director of A Chorus of Women, Johanna McBride, who was actually on the conversation that we had this morning. And Ubuntu is an African concept that means that we are all deeply interconnected. We get our humanity through and because of each other. This principle is one of the guiding principles for Nelson Mandela's prime ministership in South Africa. Johanna McBride attended a peace conference in Europe in about 2014, and she heard Desmond Tutu speaking about Ubuntu. She wrote the meaning of this philosophy into a song with the words, "I am who I am because of you. We are who we are because of each other." From the moment that I first heard this in 2006, the idea resonated very deeply with me. It's easy to feel sometimes we don't know anyone who votes for the other side of politics to ourselves. It's as if we live in separate realities, worlds that might appear to be the same, but where we have different life experiences, interact with different people, and may have different priorities for what we want out of our lives. Instead of getting angry and vilifying people who have different views to us, Ubuntu reminds us to look for how different positions are reflections of different reflections of one reality and truth. Listening to this can reveal that we have much more in common than we think. In recent years, Desmond Tutu has expanded the concept of Ubuntu to eco-Ubuntu, recognizing our interdependence with the whole living earth. Human issues such as peace, refugees, poverty alleviation, indigenous land rights, and so on are interdependent with environmental issues such as animal welfare, land degradation, deforestation, climate change, and so on. Peace on earth and peace with the earth are two sides of the same coin. In the Chorus of Women, we like to sing Ubuntu often, but we also like to encourage our audience to sing this as an affirmation of our shared humanity. So we're not going to ask you to sing with us tonight, although with your mute on you can if you wish. But to give a sense of this, we're going to play you a video that was made at an event in 2016 called Mission Climate, where we interwove personal and scientific reflections on climate change with musical and visual responses to share an emotional journey with the audience. And we had the audience sing Ubuntu with us. So I'm going to ask Jenny now to put on the video. Maybe we'll have about a minute of this, Jenny. Thank you.
Also very beautiful. So take a breath, and we might move to check in. I mean, one of the things we want to do is to build political will is to increase our numbers. We want to build a really strong network of women across all electorates in Australia. And part of that is hearing what you're thinking, what ways we can consider in supporting each other. And tonight we'd like to invite you to introduce yourself if you wish. We've only allocated a short time for this, 5 or 6 minutes. and there's quite a few of us to get through, so we may not get to hear from everyone, but you also have the opportunity to introduce yourself via the chat. So what we'd like you to do, invite you to say your name, where you're from, and something you long to see happening in the post-COVID environment. So it's now open, and anyone who would like to start, just unmute themselves and speak.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kim Liu. I live in the Darug Nation, land of the Darug Nation, and I'm the acting chair for Doctors for the Environment in New South Wales. I'm a member of the Climate and Health Alliance, the Australian Medical Association, the Hills Doctors Association, also Citizens Climate Lobby Australia, Australian Parents for Climate Action.
Oh, thank you. And what do you long to see post-COVID? What would you love to see?
For the government, every single sector of the government to view the world through the lens of climate change, climate action, because we need climate change systemically. So whether it's the Department of Agriculture, Environment, Urban Planning, Health, and so on, if it's viewed through the lens of climate change and human rights, then we'll have something dramatic happening, which we require systemic change in society.
Thank you. Who else would like to introduce themselves? And this is quite short: your name, where you're located, and something you long to see happening post-COVID.
Hi everybody, I'll go. My name is Amanda Lamont. I'm currently based in the lands of the Wurundjeri people in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria. And I have, my profession is in disaster resilience and emergency management. So I'm currently working with communities in Northeast Victoria in their bushfire recovery, which has been complicated because of COVID-19. In terms of what I would like to see happen coming out of COVID is not the same thing as when we went in. So my biggest fear is that we will have this major global disruption and not take advantage of the time for reflection to do things differently. And I want to be part of the catalysts and the interrupters and the influencers that really take the opportunity to lead or influence leadership for fundamental shifting in the way that we relate to each other and how we, I guess, live on this planet. Thanks.
Thank you. Someone else? Just very briefly, if you could. I'll go. I'm Lynn, as you know, and I'm in Canberra at the moment. And what I long for is what I longed for this morning, is for the economy to be based on the donut economy, which puts care for the planet and care for people at the centre of the economy rather than growth. Anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Donna. I'm on the Central Coast, so I'm on the land of the Darkinjung people. I feel that I'm in very good company tonight looking at the other attendees, so thank you for having me. What would I like as part of a post-COVID recovery? I think for everyone to recognise that we're in a climate emergency, and whether that's all levels of government, the people in my neighbourhood or my municipality, and for us to behave as such, and I guess stop destroying the biosphere and any chance we may have of turning this Titanic around. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone else? Helen? Just to unmute yourself, Helen.
Yes, I'm Helen Pilkington and I'm in Canberra in the Ngunnawal Ngambri country. And what I wish is that we listen to the young people and that we hear what they're saying about what they need for the future, we all need for the future, and that we take, as they're saying, we take climate change very seriously in the post-COVID era. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Anyone else? Kirsten?
Hi, my name is Kirsten. I'm from Canberra in the Ngunnawal country. We've just had an issue arise here in Canberra in relation to a piece of land that used to hold the CSIRO headquarters, and it's been discovered that there's significance for Indigenous people to this land. The land has already been fenced off, ready for development. So I would like to see the ACT government to recognise that this is in fact important land for the Indigenous people and to take down the fences, for that to happen all over the country so that Indigenous rights are recognised, and for governments to do things because they're the right thing to do.
Thank you, Kirsten. Anyone else? Christine. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm Christine. I'm in Canberra as well, in Ngunnawal in the Ngambri country. What I'd like to see is that enough people around the world who have been affected by this huge shake-up, and in Australia in particular also with our bushfires, that people have seen that communities, people in community can work really beautifully together and support each other and empathise, and creative things that can come out of that, such as cooperatives and amazing arts creativity. So lots of stuff at the local level.
Thanks, Christine. Before we move on, is there anyone who's really keen to introduce themselves? Looking around. Okay. Please take advantage of the chat if you'd like to just say your name and where you're from and what you'd like to see post-COVID. You can do that anytime during the session. But we might move on now, and I'd ask Janet to set the scene for our conversation about those 3 questions. Over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Lynn, and hello again, everybody. It's really exciting to see everyone here and to hear where people are from around the country. We're certainly gathering a network of women in many different places now, even some people overseas. So I can just say hello to my cousin Jane in England there. So just briefly, in the Women's Climate Congress, we only got started on this project in January and February when we had, before the COVID lockdown, we had open meetings in Canberra where women came together wanting to respond really to the terrible bushfires of the last summer. And we started to bring together ideas for this Women's Climate Congress that were, and based initially on a discussion paper that I wrote, which is on our website. So since then, we've been working really hard. We've sort of created a website, and you can now go to the website of the Women's Climate Congress, and we probably should put the website address in the chat. Maybe Sarah could do that sometime. There's a lot of information there, background information. We've created vision statement, and my discussion paper is there, and there's also the 2 Zooms. This is the 3rd of these Zoom meetings, but the other 2 Zoom meetings we've had have been more like panel discussions, and we've been talking about the background of WCC and what we're trying to achieve. But most importantly, all through, we've been reaching out and building our membership. So our plan is to build a network of women around the country and possibly even around the world. But within Australia, we want to have women in every electorate in the country if we can, so that we can start using our voices to talk to our local representatives, maybe initially at the federal level, but also our state, importantly actually our state and local representatives as well, to bring about the type of cultural change that we would like to see, to allow a collaborative working together to work through the issues of climate change and to unblock some of the roadblocks that we've had so far, which have come out of our very partisan way of doing politics, which is very adversarial, as we know. So we're building our network, and so far we have, on our Facebook group, we have about 325 members on that group with quite active discussion going on, and we have also a mailing list of about another 100 or so women, and some of whom have actually joined up on our website where there is a join us form, which we would really like you to all go and fill in, because that actually has a space where you can fill in what your electorate is and we can start to sort of map where people are and put you in touch with other people in your area so that you can have conversations and together and focus on local issues if that's important, and start sort of conversations with your local representatives. So we've also been building up relationships with many other women's groups, and there's quite now a long list of other women's organisations who we have been in contact with. Barbara Bakey, who is one of our members who was online this morning and who's the past president of the National Council of Women Australia, has been very busy putting us in contact with many women who are senior women in these other organisations, and there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. We've also put an information kit on our website, which will sort of gives templates for letters to your local members and information about sort of how to start a local conversation about the sort of issues that are important to us. And we've been doing some advocacy work. This is my last point. And some letters to politicians, among which we've written to all of the women members of the government about our distress that the National COVID Coordination Commission is heavily weighted towards men. In fact, out of a commission of 10 people altogether, there are 8 men and 2 women. Is that right? Yeah. So we were a little bit distressed by that, so we've written a letter to them, and we also sent that letter to the women members of that commission and the chair of the commission, and to our surprise really we had a letter back saying we could have a meeting with the chair of the commission, so that's Mr. Neville Power, and that's going to be on Thursday. So Kirsten, who's online here, and myself and Barbara Bakey, one of our other members, are going to have a meeting with Neville Powell on Thursday. So we've been thinking about, you know, what we can say to him. But I will maybe come back a little bit more to that in a minute, but for the moment I'm going to pass back to Lynn to maybe frame up that about the commission a little bit, and we can hear from you. Yeah.
Okay. The NCC has 2 key roles. It is to help minimise and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on jobs and businesses, and to facilitate the fastest possible recovery of lives and livelihoods. So that's the commission that we'll be meeting with on Thursday. And I think the urgency of this is really borne out in a comment from Christine Figueres, who was the public face of the Paris Agreement. She was a UN executive at that time. And she said that how we implement the recovery will actually determine how we respond to climate change. If we don't get the recovery based on something that is going to facilitate dealing with climate change, we will set ourselves back a very long way. So this is a really critical time in terms not only of COVID recovery, but in terms of climate change. So our question is, what new opportunities for achieving climate balance are coming out of the pandemic? And what messages would you like the WCC to convey to the NCCC on 25 June? So again, it's an open conversation. We'd love to hear from you, but you can also put comments into the chat. And we hope to get to everyone who wants to speak, but our time is limited. So, but now the floor is open. So what opportunities are coming out of COVID for achieving climate balance, and what are the messages for the NCCC? Karen? Hi, would you like to unmute yourself, Karen? Yeah. Karen, I did introduce you.
No, I'm so
okay.
sorry. I had a bit of an emergency and yes, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I did mention that you were joining us, Karen, and that you're a candidate and that you're joining us as a citizen tonight. Did you want to speak to that topic?
I'm joining you as a mum of 5, someone that's super worried about our future.
Yeah.
And we've lost 30 years now since we started this journey with climate action, and we've got 30 yet left if you listen to our government. But I really don't believe that we've got 30 years left, so we need to get onto this. The NCCC is killing me, I have to say. Their lack of focus on renewables is absolutely ridiculous. Having a loaded coal lobby group as our recovery board is outrageous. It's like, the gas-led recovery is like giving up cigarettes and starting cigar smoking. So we need to really put our foot down, I believe, and we need to say, look, none of us have really been consulted. They keep lying that there's been all these bodies consulted, and we really want to see a renewables-led recovery.
Thank you, Karen. And if you would like to speak, maybe just raise your hand so that we can see that you're interested to talk. Kim?
Oh, yes, okay, so actually having a gas-led recovery is, in a way, there's more emissions than with coal-fired power stations because of the fugitive emissions from methane. So methane is 80% more potent over a 20-year period than CO2. And at the moment, it is the gas will actually fuel our climate crisis. And we need to find a way of educating our population so they can actually demand action on this, because because I've been lobbying politicians for 5 years, driving backwards and forwards from Canberra. So, and the Labor Party doesn't understand gas, and the Liberals are tied to their fossil fuels. And at the moment, we need to find a way for our community to actually yell it loud and clear that gas is not the answer. We've got BZE has got their Million Jobs program that they've just launched in terms of jobs in renewables, jobs in building sustainable housing. There are so many options and paths that we can choose and not have a gas-led recovery.
Thank you, Kim. Anyone else like to add their piece? So what other messages would you like us to give to the NCCC?
Hi, I'm Lee,
Yeah.
and I'm in Sydney. I just think that COVID-19 demonstrated to us that we're very capable of change, and change very quickly. And that's something that people are very scared of in terms of looking towards renewables and changes to support the environment. But we've been able to show that we can do that. And so the impetus is there, but the danger is that we just shift back to how we've been doing things. And, you know, just even in terms of the recovery process of, you know, encouraging development of housing and, you know, very good ideas to give people jobs, but that could have equally have been, you know, a solar energy powered led project that could have gone rolled out right around the country and provided people with a lot of work. So it's just really presenting that group with some ideas that, you know, there are some different ways we can do things, and we've demonstrated as a nation that we can do things differently, and we've demonstrated as a world that we can do things differently when we have to. So I think that's one of the really key messages that could sort of then challenge people to think about doing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Lee. Christine.
Sorry, I was on the wrong screen. Just following up from Lee with that, how about asking them about social housing? You know, they've talked about how they want to give work for builders, and therefore they're veering towards these renovations. Can you ask them about, or suggest to them, that there's lots of scope with social housing and also housing of people who have been affected by the bushfires?
Thanks, Christine. Kirsten?
Thanks, Lynn. I actually have a question for Karen about the matter that Christine just raised. It seems to me that, I've heard reports that there are people in Tilba who are still waiting for their houses to be built after the bushfires went through a couple of years ago. So what's the effect? Will this policy help people get their houses built, or does it just increase the price of construction and so make it more difficult?
It's a really good question, and I'm in Bredbo, so I've actually got quite a few people around us that have lost houses as well. And everybody's making it difficult for them to get back on their feet. There's so much red tape. I've got a family in Bumbalong that they can't even have demolition because their trucks can't go across their unapproved bridge, so they're refusing to go over. I think this Reno Rort, I'm calling it Reno Rort because they're giving money to people who can already afford to do work on their houses. I really believe it should be going towards community housing. A lot of our small towns in Edom and Arrow are really struggling, and they're struggling with community housing because there's so few. We're also finding that women over 55 are now in a unique position where we've got a lot more that are going to be homeless than ever before because they haven't benefited from their husband's superannuation and they've left the relationship, so now they're sort of left with nothing. So I think our government really needs to look at community housing and looking at those less fortunate and how we can get them on their feet. But all this pork barreling in our region at the moment is just embarrassing, and it's just a slap in the face for these poor people that still 6 months on can't get on their feet.
Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone who wants to comment on this question before we move on to the next, where we might combine the next two questions? Yes, Janet?
Yeah, so I'd just quite like to make a bit of a comment in relation to some of the thinking that we've been doing in my original sort of discussion paper. I talked about mediation as a way to unblock our blocked up political discourse, and I didn't mean a sort of very negotiation sort of mediation process, developing a process by which we could bring people together. And I mean, the way in which the NCCC is operating, it seems to be a very typical, well, it is a typical government process. There are hundreds of committees and processes that work this way, where they have actually a huge list of different groups that they have apparently met, and they're meeting with us. So, but each one of these people will meet with them individually, so that everyone gets their separate go. It's like an inquiry, and then they will sort of process what they think about all of this and presumably make some recommendations. That's the process. And then I mean, you can already hear from what's being said around here that actually no one will be happy. So that so we will continue with the adversarial discourse. We won't get past the roadblocks, and I mean, maybe the wisest decisions won't be this very short window we have now to get some of the right policies in place, not lock in things that are going to prevent us from reaching those 10 and 30-year goals that we know that we have to reach. So one sort of thing, you know, we want to try and seed the idea both in this meeting but also in all of the relationship building we try and do around the country, that maybe there's a different way. I mean, can we get the decision makers to buy into the idea that it's beneficial for the country, in the long run it's beneficial for the economy, and it's definitely beneficial for people and life, to have a sort of a round table process. So instead of those people coming individually and giving their view, we can bring people together, develop a process that really sort of listens to where, you know, what people are coming, and we find our common ground and develop the common goals that are and I would love to see as part of that, you know, nurture of life, the future of our children is sort of absolutely front and center of those sorts of discussions. So that, yeah, that's the big picture idea. Yeah.
Thanks, Janet. Jill, did you want to unmute yourself and speak now too?
It's sort of hard to know where to begin on all of this. So the NCCC actually has a very broad remit to advise the government on the non-health aspects of the pandemic, but its membership is very limited. And in particular, it's missing people from the sectors most affected by the job losses. It's missing people from, who know about creating jobs and reducing inequity and marginalisation. And it's missing people from the sectors where there are the most jobs. And gas and coal are not those areas. So I think it's important that, there needs to be, I mean, it was put together to facilitate some fast decision making in the same way that the National Cabinet has been put together and worked pretty well for quite a while, to do away with the bureaucracy and get the people who could make informed decisions together, and so that they could work quickly. And I was on a conference a few weeks ago where a lot of the energy ministers were participating in that, and they said this was amazing, you know, just being in a conference where everybody was there and they were able to get direct feedback, and it was way better than the COAG system. And so I think that it was that thinking that was behind the NCCC. The problem is that they haven't got everybody, a wide variety of interests and expertise in the room in order to make good decisions. People who are, as I said, aware of the wide variety of impacts from the COVID-19 response, and who have expertise to be able to inform the response to that. It's very narrow, and some of the stories I've heard from people close to and who are working on this are just pretty horrendous. So I think one of the things we could be pushing for, and I can't remember if it's in the actual, or if it's alluded to in the terms of reference, but is actually pushing for the recovery to be for the common good. And that certainly fits in with the broader remit. And just going through your personal contacts and pushing for your pet projects that that you are personally going to benefit from, I think is pretty poor. They've been in damage control mode since then. But what we should be doing, I think what we should be seeking for, is to mobilise whole of economy effort or whole of society effort to ensure that there's good economic and social, to ensure that the economic and social impacts from the response to COVID-19 are actually anticipated and mitigated, which is that they're supposed to be doing. That's in their terms of reference, and so is marshalling all the resources needed. You know, I don't know. It's just sort of hard to do it, you know. And so, how might we frame that? Is, you know, focusing on the common good and the need for broader input. And I know that there's a lot of people have been calling for a change of membership, which I guess would be ideal. But in absence of that, and that might be sort of like a red rag to a bull, maybe what we could do is saying, well, how can we help them to hear from the wide variety of people that they need to hear from at once? Because it's by coming together, you know, and hearing lots of different perspectives, that wise decision making is more likely.
Thanks, Jill. What I thought we might do is just continue this conversation and pick up a couple of themes from the other questions. And we've kind of segued quite nicely into the idea of who should we be collaborating with, and also how can we engage local groups and local people in supporting the changes that we want. So maybe we could just continue, Bet, if you wanted to bring in some of that issue around what collaborations might strengthen our reach and influence, and what can be done at the local level. So I'll just again put the floors open.
So Lynn, Amanda is wanting to speak.
Okay, Amanda. Lovely. Great, thank you.
Sorry, the lighting is so bad in this room.
Yes, sorry, I didn't see you there, Amanda.
Yeah, I'm in the dark. Apologies. Look, you can see me. You can see my teeth. I'll keep smiling. Look, I just wanted to comment on the previous conversation and make some analogies between some of the bushfire recovery and disaster recovery work that I do and COVID, which is of course a disaster as well. And I was just looking at the terms of the NCCC, its roles. The one about facilitating the fastest possible recovery of lives and livelihoods. One of the major foundational principles of disaster recovery is that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you rush into recovery and do things really quickly, you usually make bad decisions that are short-term focused and not sustainable. I'm really concerned. That is such a simplistic view of what recovery looks like to a disaster, that it's just got to be fast. And they haven't even talked about ethical, sustainable, fair recovery for all. It's just do it really quick. And I imagine that if NCCC focuses on the fastest possible recovery, people will be left behind. There won't be a thorough investigation of opportunities to be more future-proof or future-ready. So what we do when we do disaster recovery, obviously, is we look at saying, well, perhaps we shouldn't build back in the floodplain. So like the jobs conversation, perhaps we shouldn't get people back into those jobs, but we should be looking for a more future-proof, sustainable job for people. So I would be definitely saying to the NCCC that their mandate is perhaps not focused appropriately on appropriate recovery, just quick recovery for the sake of recovering fast. Obviously, we want people, and Karen talked about people not being in homes yet. We want people to be safe and secure and comfortable and protected and sheltered. That is, of course, important. But in the meantime, for the longer term, I think there needs to be a lot more planning about what an appropriate recovery from COVID looks like. And to me, I've been involved in a number of conversations, and I'm concerned organisations, the strategy is around getting back to what the organisation was doing before as fast as possible, as opposed to a total shake-up and rethink and re-engineering of the way organisations are doing business. So that's one thing I'd be saying to the NCCC. The other thing, just in terms of mobilising the community, is that we really, look, I'm just really excited about the opportunity to talk to people about what has changed in their lives because of COVID and what things they would like to see carrying forward. People were out walking in parks and green spaces. People really like seeing pictures of fake news, maybe swans in Venice, and animals returning to areas that we haven't seen before. So I think that we actually really want to promote and get people behind some of those things that we saw that were a positive impact on climate and carry them forward and create a movement. That's not easy, but I just thought I would jump in and say all that while I had the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Were you wanting to speak? Can you unmute yourself?
That's just a hand sign we use in meetings to show that we agree.
That's good. Yeah, well, we agree. Anyone else want to speak about collaborations, mobilising local people and groups?
So I think working locally is so vitally important because a lot of the mitigation, adaptation that needs to be done is actually at the local council level. And so a lot of my friends who work more extensively federally also work in their local groups. So my local group is the Hills for Climate Action. So I'm the Hills, and my federal member is Alex Hawke, and my state member is David Elliott. And I have a council that doesn't acknowledge country when they actually start each council meeting. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but we're doing it. We're starting. So, and it's really there are so many studies now to show that communities that are more cohesive and are sort of more inclusive survive crises. And we actually need to find a way of connecting. Even I've got friends who are climate deniers who are still my good friends. So we need to be inclusive and accept people for what we have on the common ground. And because we all care about clean air, water, healthy soils, really stable climate, and a healthy ecosystem, even though some people might not realise that. So there are lots of community groups that's active with their councils already. So maybe work in cooperation or alliances with lots of those groups. I know with my other group, Australian Parents for Climate Action, we're kind of working locally, but we're looking at state levels as well. And this is a bunch of parents and grandparents, so all of you could join it. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Anyone else?
I think Donna wanted to say something.
Yeah, Donna?
Yeah, I guess I'm part of a national permaculture crisis response group, and I know for some people they don't actually know what permaculture is, or another aspect of that is it actually doesn't necessarily resonate with people. A friend of mine who's down in the seat of Hume, which is a very conservative Liberal seat, he lives in Goulburn, is working on a project at the moment where and this is off the back of COVID, where, you know, there's now a lot of interest in people. People are trying to grow their own food. You know, people couldn't get chickens if they wanted to over that period of time. And so we're trying to leverage off that. And he's working with beekeepers, the ANU, Walter Genet, who uses water for carbon drawdown. And what we're hoping to do is use that as a pilot program that we can roll out nationally. And I guess conceptually what we would like to achieve is looking at all of the, if you think about, I guess, a community, your local community being a hub, and off that is a whole lot of spokes, and they might be your community gardens, you know, your local crop swap, whatever, you know, all of those things that can bring community together. But for the everyday person, and I'm on the Central Coast, so I have a certain demographic where climate emergency particularly doesn't resonate. How can we speak in a language that resonates with people to help them do drawdown with actually using any of the terms that those familiar with climate emergency would use?
Yeah.
And I guess what we think may work is to have, if you like, a digital platform like a web-based hub or something where people can tap in and see what's available in their local community and provide people with support and resources. And how do we get the everyday person engaged in a different way? Anyway, so that's just something that I'm working on with a couple of people at the moment.
Thank you, Donna. That's a great question and one that we're all grappling with, I think. We've got time for one more comment, and I wondered if there's anyone who hasn't spoken who is really desperate to say something just before we close off. So Karen, you were wanting to say something too at this point?
I just wanted to add value to the last comment about regenerative agriculture and regenerative farming. Like, coal is a big deal and we need to wind that back. But regenerative farming is such an amazing thing. It's my new favourite thing in the world. And I've been looking at it with the Bredbo community because there's so many ways that we can introduce grasslands and you know, like using herds to, you know, be like nature. And there's a real place for it. It's also a great way to absolutely absorb carbon quite quickly. So I'd really love that to be put towards the NCCC as well, is that it's a really important thing for our farmers to be provided mentoring and support, because a lot of them don't even know about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think what this is telling us is that we need at some stage to have a conference so that people could have a chance to hear all of these ideas in depth and to have some conversation about them. So I'd like to thank you very much for the contributions you've all made tonight. It's been fantastic. And before we close off, I was just going to hand back to Janet. Because having heard all this, Janet, I wondered how you might like to, whether you might like to finish off by talking about one thing people could do when they leave here to progress all this.
Yes, thanks, Lynn. That would be really good. I almost feel tempted to say a bit more than just one thing. I will say the one thing in a minute, but I just feel that, well, one thing is to, well, another thing, not the one thing, but another thing that people can do is to really think about how we can stand in our sort of moral authority, if you like, as women and as parents, aunties, grandmothers, you know, guardians of the next generation, to actually speak to our elected representatives, the people that are there to represent us, to do that in a kind of relationship building way where we can say, well, this is what we expect you to do, the right thing, as Kirsten was saying earlier. And this is where I think a great strength of a network of voices could, you know, like, could have an impact to sort of continually reinforce this, that, you know, whatever the policies are that are being developed, tell us how that is going to protect the children. You know, if you're telling me that there has to be a little bit of gas in the mix, well, tell me how that's going to work. You know, how is, you know, where are the emissions going to come down? Because we have to meet these targets, otherwise we're going to be in a catastrophic position in a few years' time. So the one thing that you can do to leave this meeting is, which we have asked when people join up on our website, Jenny sends out a wonderful welcome letter to everyone. And what we say is, write to your local member and just tell them about the WCC and that you've joined it. So this is just a way of getting it known that there is a network of women who are standing up for the nurture of life out there and are going to be expecting them to do the right thing. We've actually put a template on our website of the letter that you can use with the type of language which we think is appropriate for our vision and our mission. So it's there, and that's just one simple thing to start to let our decision makers know that they've got a bunch of women on their case. So I think that would be a really great thing for people to do. Thanks.
Again, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Sarah and Jenny, for technical support. One other small plug is that we are a really small organisation and things have gone pretty fast. And if you're interested in joining and volunteering to help, we would love to have more people. And we need almost every skill in the book. So whatever you have would be probably really useful to us. So if you feel like kind of getting your hands a bit dirty on this kind of stuff, please feel free to join us. Now, we may have a song to finish, or we may not. I'm not quite sure. How are we going, Jenny, there? Yeah? Okay. Well, Janet, again, you might like to just say a couple of words on this last song, which is For Our Planet's Sake. And this will be our closing segment. So thank you again very much, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah.
I'll hand to Janet now.
So Chorus of Women in Canberra hasn't been able to sing together, of course, through the COVID isolation, but we are sort of allowed out and about a bit more now. So with suitable social distancing, we did go and sing down by the lake the other day, and we sang this little round, which and the words are just so much WCC vision. So I thought it would be nice to play as we go out. Talk for our planet's sake.
Talk for our planet's sake. Talk with heart and reason. Care for nature, care for humans. Talk for our planet's sake. Talk with heart and reason. Care for nature, care for humans. Care for our children's future. Talk for our planet's sake. Talk with heart and reason. Care for nature, care for humans. Care for our children's future. Talk for our planet's sake.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, and thanks also to all of those people who put so much wonderful information in the chat. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Really helpful. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.